Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, and Novak Djokovic are undoubtedly the GOATs of the tennis world. For almost the last 20 years, these three players have dominated the circuit in an unprecedented way, destroying all competition. For most tennis players, playing against them meant an almost assured defeat. However, some players did manage to claim at least one win against each of these legends. But there is one player that actually achieved the impossible, a feat that would never be repeated. This guy defeated all members of the Big Three in a row and in a single tournament. And not only did he beat them, he absolutely destroyed them. The most impressive thing is that it was not done by a legendary player that appears on the lists of the best of all time. It was accomplished by a player who was past his prime and who many people thought was washed up. A player who today is best remembered as an underachiever. Who is this guy that conquered the impossible when no one else believed in him? None other than David Nalbandian. But how did he beat the odds and smash the three best tennis players of all time in a single week? That's what we are here to figure out. Before that, when and where was this feat? 2007 Madrid Masters. David Nalbandian was far from being the new kid on the tennis block by 2007. He had already reached the semi-finals of every Grand Slam, and he had even won his most important title at the 2005 Tennis Masters Cup in Shanghai, in an incredible and thrilling final against Roger Federer. Nevertheless, going into Madrid in 2007, he was far from his prime. He had dropped to the 26th place in the ATP ranking and only reached one quarter-final in the whole year. Injuries and the lack of work ethic he was so often criticised for seemed to have cut short his career and left the best Nalbandian in the past. Nobody expected much from him in this tournament. Despite a very tough draw in Madrid, Nalbandian was confident that he would have a good week to reverse his lousy year. However, not even he could have dreamed of what would happen in those 7 days. The tournament was challenging from the start. In the first 2 rounds, Nalbandian had to battle in very even matches against 2 top players like Arnaud Clement and Thomas Berdych, the then world number 9. After these wins, Nalbandian went into beast mode. In the next round, he pulverized his young compatriot Juan Martín del Potro 6-4, 6-2. Still, the most impressive was yet to come. In the quarterfinals, Nalbandian met with world number 2, Rafael Nadal. The Spaniard was already a 3-time Grand Slam champion and Federer's great competitor for hegemony in men's tennis. The local was certainly the favorite, but the Argentine knew he had a few things on his side. I knew that against Rafa, if I ever had the chance to beat him, it was here. Fast, indoors, altitude. I mean, the conditions were much better for me than for him for sure, and I think that year he didn't play a lot of the last few weeks, so maybe he was a little bit out of rhythm. Nalbandian was absolutely right. The indoor conditions of the Madrid Masters were perfectly suited to his style of play. The null chance of a bad bounce allowed him to use his excellent anticipation to play almost inside the court, while the speed of the ball favoured his hard ground strokes from both sides and promoted short points. On the flip side, Nadal has historically had trouble making his powerful topspin work on indoor courts, undoubtedly his worst surface. Although Nalbandian had a good reason to be confident, not even in his most optimistic thoughts could he have imagined that the result would be such a landslide. From start to finish, the dominance of the game fell on his side. Nalbandian took advantage of his deep shots to hurt the Spaniard, who, throughout the match, stayed too far back, several meters behind the baseline. This was a fatal mistake that allowed the Argentine to take control of the match and play almost all points in a very offensive position. Nadal's great defense was not enough to slow down Nalbandian, largely because his position on the court didn't allow him to switch from defense to offense. At the same time, Nadal never found any real means to damage his opponent. Even when he tried to take a more aggressive approach, Nalbandian used his great anticipation to counterattack effectively. His serve was also far from providing solutions, as he suffered 5 breaks. Nalbandian chose to be ultra-offensive on the Spaniard's serves, receiving them inside the court and surprising Nadal, who found no way to neutralize these aggressive returns. In just 71 minutes, the Argentine crushed the Spaniard 6-1, 6-2. Pretty impressive, right, David? In the semi-finals, his next rival was a brilliant young player on an astonishing rise. Novak Djokovic was still a young 20-year-old in 2007, but he had already displayed his massive talent. Not only was he number 3 in the world, but he had just won the Miami and Canada Masters and reached the US Open final. Djokovic was on a great run, and his game was more suited to the indoors than Nadal's, as he is still proving even today. To top it off, the Serb had destroyed the Argentinian in Montreal months before. Nalbandian was again not remotely the favourite. Nevertheless, he kept his confidence unshaken. Pretty much the same. I mean, the conditions here I think were better for me than for him, and I was already playing a great level, with a lot of confidence after beating Rafa in that way. This match was much more even, taking almost 2 hours. Djokovic felt more comfortable on the surface than Nadal and did not play as far back as the world number 2. Both players served really well and tried to take control of the game at all moments, which led to very contested points. Djokovic's superb defense allowed him to resist the Argentine's relentless attacks with more effectiveness. However, this did not diminish Nalbandian's insistence, and he still was extremely aggressive, even when returning. In the first set, Nalbandian had to save 2 decisive break points, but he took advantage of the opportunities he had to take that opening set 6-4. While Djokovic kept trying to inconvenience and damage his rival, the skill and creativity of Nalbandian during the match were very high, even earning the applause of the Serb himself. The second set was no easier. Both managed to hold their serves in very close games. Djokovic did not make any big mistakes. Instead, he was able to stay in the match until the end. Nevertheless, Nalbandian again imposed himself in the decisive moments and took the match in a hard-fought tiebreak. For the second time in a row, David surprised the tennis world and eliminated the world number 3 in straight sets, achieving what would be his only victory against Djokovic in his whole career. I was ready to fight, and I think I played better in the important moments than him, but playing amazing tennis. After a year and a half, Nalbandian reached another ATP final. Waiting for him there was an old acquaintance. Federer and Nalbandian were products of the same generation of players and knew each other very well. Even during the early days of their rivalry, Nalbandian was the dominating player. He not only beat the Swiss in the US Open boys singles final, but also in their first 5 professional matches. I always think I can beat Federer because we played juniors all the time, so every time we went on court, I always knew that I had chances, lots of chances. While Nalbandian dominated during the early years of their rivalry, Federer had turned things around during his peak. The Swiss had the lead in the head-to-head 8-6 and had won the last 5 meetings. Federer was the defending champion of the Madrid Masters and had eliminated Nalbandian in the semi-finals of the last edition in straight sets, even with a bagel in the second set. At the same time, Nalbandian had lost all 3 Masters 1000 finals he had played, but he was still confident, boosted by his victories over Nadal and Djokovic. The Argentine was ready to break his curse and pull off the big upset. However, the match couldn't have started any worse for him. Nalbandian's aggressive and forward style did not work as well at first against a player as offensive as Federer. The Swiss managed to take advantage of the spaces left by his opponent, using his high precision to hurt him. Nalbandian tried to play on equal terms, sticking to his strategy, but was unable to stand his ground against Federer's genius. The Swiss took the first set with a resounding 6-1, and everything seemed to suggest that the rest of the match would continue along the same lines. But for the second set, Nalbandian did what he had already done in the last matches. He went into beast mode. He not only did not back up, but he also increased his accuracy and aggressiveness and was able to surprise Federer and put him in a defensive and uncomfortable position. Federer tried to maintain his attacking playstyle and to move his opponent around the court, but failed to overpower Nalbandian. Soon, the second set was over 6-3 in favor of the Argentine. Everything would be defined in the last set of the tournament. Although the world number 1 was a specialist in stressful situations, Nalbandian's level and determination were through the roof. Federer tried everything he could. He attacked relentlessly to regain control of the match, but Nalbandian was unstoppable. It seemed that the Argentine could not fail. And although Federer kept the match competitive with all his strengths, Nalbandian controlled the third set from start to finish, winning some high-flying points cheered by the fans. In the end, Nalbandian took the decisive set with a clear 6-3 and became champion in Madrid. In a final that lasted 1 hour and 49 minutes and started in an adverse way, Nalbandian knew that the victory was always in his hands. In his post-match press conference, Federer acknowledged his opponent's achievement.
Yeah, he's giving me some hard matches before, so I knew it was going to be difficult for me, but that he played that well, a bit of a surprise maybe, but he's had a great tournament beating the best players this week.
Nalbandian had achieved the impossible, but the craziest part is that he almost did it again just 2 weeks later in the 2007 Paris Open. There, once again, Nalbandian was untouchable. In the third round, he beat, in straight sets, a revenge-hungry Federer, and then destroyed once more a Nadal in the final, this time 6-4, 6-love. Nalbandian turned around his season, re-entered the top 10, and also became the 3rd player in history to defeat the world number 1, 2, and 3 in the same tournament. Yet, none of these were his greatest achievement. In Madrid, he became the first and only player to defeat Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic in a row. With Federer's recent retirement, Nalbandian is the only player who will be able to tell his grandchildren how he crushed the entire Big Three in 1 week. Pretty impressive for an underachiever, right? Sadly, Nalbandian never played at that level again. He soon fell back down the rankings again and performed inconsistently until his retirement in 2013. Despite his enormous talent, Nalbandian never won a Grand Slam, and that's a big part of his legacy. But during those 2 weeks in 2007, he proved that, when inspired, he could crush absolutely anyone.